Welcome back. We're going to take some time today to talk about Thecla. Now, I hope that so far you've enjoyed the book and you're just kind of getting your feet wet in kind of studying about and imagining about the virtues. This woman we're going to talk about today, Thecla, she represents for us the virtue of chastity. Now, why would we want to talk about Thecla and talk about this virtue? First of all, you may have thought in the book, why is she talking about somebody that we're not really quite sure lived? Well, I have to be honest with you. I did research on her and I found her so fascinating. I thought, let's kind of talk about her and see what it is that she has to teach us. She is tied to the Cappadocians in kind of a unique way. We haven't gotten there yet, but eventually you're going to hear about a young baby that was born. Macrina was her name. Her brothers are Basil and Gregory of Nyssa. And right before she's born, they tell the story that there was a visitor to the home. Now, whether that was an angel, it was like a supernatural visitor to the home that told her mother, this baby's secret name will be Thecla. And so there was something in that connection between Macrina, who we're going to read about in the future, and this woman, Thecla. There was some kind of foreshadowing from this woman's life that was going to inform what was going to be coming on later. So it's fascinating to go back and say, okay, so who was Thecla and where in the world do we get her story? So her story comes from a document that was circled around in the early church called the Acts of Paul and Thecla. It was never really a verified document. It's obviously not in the Bible. And to tell you the truth, if you read it, it kind of starts out sort of normal and then gets into crazy stories about her. But that's not altogether unusual. We call that kind of documentation maybe hagiography. It is turning somebody into a saint. It's kind of taking the basics of their life and then making it sort of at a higher level. So whether we can actually take every detail as truth, which, there's a great story of her jumping into a pool of killer seals and she baptizes herself. Some of that, maybe it's over the top. But at the end of the day, if you begin to look at some of the foundational pieces of this woman's life, you can begin to believe that she actually existed. There are reasons why I would want to put that connection together, because eventually, just south of Cappadocia, in an area called Seleucia, there's actually a shrine that develops for her and for her life that exists for several hundred years. And in the excavations, they discovered pools there that thousands of people used to come and worship at this shrine. Not that they worshiped her, but that they saw in her life something that really drew them to Christ. And what was it about this woman that drew them to Christ? And it has to do with sexual purity. And I think that's an important conversation around virtue. Now, sexual purity in the sense that she was engaged, she was supposed to be married, she heard the Apostle Paul preach the good news, and she knew that there was nothing else in this world that she wanted but Jesus Christ. And so she runs away and follows Paul. She's actually condemned to death for leaving her fiance because it was considered a crime what she was doing. Along the way, she commits herself to saying, I will never be married. I'm going to do what I can to follow Jesus Christ. Now, this idea of not being married, you might say, well, what was it that she was missing out on? Wasn't she going to miss out on what life had to offer? To be honest with you, marriage in those early days in those days of the Roman Empire was not such a positive prospect for a young girl. Often a young girl, maybe around 16 or so, was married to an older man. The man had to have established himself to have the financial resources to care for the young woman. And so it wasn't unusual, actually, that a young woman then, after maybe 5 or 10 years of marriage, after several children, discovers that she is a widow. Now, that is if she actually survives bearing children. For you see, women died on a regular basis giving birth to children. To actually replace a society, a community, at that period of time, a woman had to deliver 10 babies just to replace society and replace herself because so many babies died and so many mothers died. So actually the prospect of marriage, the other thing is that marriage was not necessarily a loving relationship. Often it was for the secure state of society, but the man would have plenty of other mistresses on the side while the woman was at home and caring for the family. So you have to imagine what the message is that Thecla is saying. I'm not going to be bound by some of those. I'm going to choose to be a virgin for my entire life and use everything that I have in service to Jesus Christ. Now that might seem a bit over the top, but there's a message there. There's a message there that says that in terms of what the world is saying, in terms of what the world says is what we should be giving into, what we should be participating in, maybe there is something about this practice of chastity that might make a difference. God was able to take her, and at least the memory of this woman, Thecla, we know that by the 4th century, which was a couple hundred years after she lived, it was common to name girls Thecla all the time because she had become such a symbol of a woman that served God. So I think the challenge for us as you go into your questions today is, what is it that you can learn from Thecla? What is it about her life and her commitment to leave everything and to follow Jesus, to follow the Apostle Paul, and how that radically changed who she was, but also set forward a trajectory in history that made a real difference? Again, Thecla, and look at the question of chastity. What does sexual purity look like for you as a follower of Jesus Christ? What does it look like for us as the church? I believe that this is something that we really need to wrestle with and question, where does that fit in our life of discipleship?